It was supposed to be our anniversary celebration, a milestone marking 3 years of building a life together. Instead, it became the day my husband revealed who he truly was. The day he discarded me like I was nothing. Little did he know, his cruel dismissal would spark a fire that would eventually consume everything he held dear. This is the story of how I went from being thrown out of my own home to owning the company my husband had sacrificed our marriage for. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. The late September evening had a perfect golden glow as I put the finishing touches on our dinner table. Our apartment in Westlake Heights overlooked the city skyline, the twinkling lights just beginning to appear as dusk settled. I had spent all day preparing Ethan's favorite meal, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables and the chocolate soufflé that always made his eyes light up. A bottle of Chateau Margaux, 2015, the same wine we'd had at our wedding, was breathing. On the counter. 3 years. 3 years of supporting Ethan as he climbed the corporate ladder at Meridian Tech Solutions, of rearranging my life to fit his schedule, of putting my own career aspirations on hold. But I had done it willingly, believing we were building something together, a foundation for our future family. I think tonight's the night he'll finally talk about starting a family, I told my sister Olivia over the phone that morning. He's been hinting about big changes and new chapters for weeks. Well, you've certainly been patient enough, Madeline, Olivia replied. I could hear her children laughing in the background, the chaotic symphony of the family life I longed for. 3 years of putting everything on hold for his career. It's time he started prioritizing what you want too. I smoothed down the emerald green dress I'd bought especially for the occasion and checked my reflection one last time. My dark hair fell in soft waves past my shoulders, and the pearl earrings Ethan had given me on our first anniversary gleamed in the warm light. Perfect. Everything was perfect. The sound of keys in the door sent a flutter of anticipation through me. Ethan was home, right on time for once. I hurried to light the candles, my heart quickening as I heard him set down his briefcase in the entryway. "Welcome home," I called out, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "Happy anniversary." When he stepped into the dining room, I immediately sensed something was off. His tie was loosened, his normally impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. But it was his eyes that truly concerned me. Cold, distant, almost calculating. Not at all the warm gaze I was accustomed to. "Ethan, is everything okay?" I asked, setting the wine glasses down. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around at the carefully arranged table, the candles, the flowers, the effort I'd put into making our anniversary special, with an expression that could only be described as annoyed. "I told you I'd be working late tonight," he finally said, though he had never mentioned any such thing. "No, you didn't," I replied carefully, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "It's our anniversary, Ethan. I've been planning this dinner for weeks." He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Look, Maddie, I don't have time for this right now. The Blackwell acquisition is happening, and I need to be focused on that, not whatever this is." He gestured dismissively at the romantic setting I'd created. "Whatever this is," I echoed, disbelief creeping into my voice. "This is our anniversary. 3 years of marriage. Remember that? The vows we took, for better or worse." Something hardened in his expression. "Speaking of that," he said, his tone suddenly businesslike, "I think we need to have a conversation that's long overdue." My stomach dropped. This wasn't the conversation I'd been anticipating. This wasn't about starting a family or our future together. The way he was looking at me, like I was a problem to be solved rather than his wife, sent a chill down my spine. "What are you talking about?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. The late nights at the office, the missed calls, the growing distance between us that I'd been trying so desperately to bridge. "This isn't working anymore," Ethan said flatly. "It hasn't been for a while. I've been given the opportunity to lead the Blackwell merger, and afterward, I'll be named CFO of the combined companies. It's everything I've worked for." I waited for him to continue, to somehow connect this career news to our marriage, to include me in his vision of success. But that connection never came. "I need someone who understands the demands of my position," he continued. "Someone who moves in the right circles, who can be an asset in the boardroom as well as the bedroom." The cruel implication hung in the air between us. I wasn't that someone. Despite my MBA from Cornell, despite the promising career I'd put on hold to support his, despite the countless networking events I'd attended at his side, charming his colleagues and superiors alike, I wasn't enough. "You're leaving me," I said, the words feeling strange and hollow in my mouth. "On our anniversary." "I'm not just leaving you, Maddie," he replied, his voice suddenly cold. "I've already left. Vanessa and I have been seeing each other for months. She understands what it takes to succeed at this level." Vanessa. His assistant. The woman who had sent me a text just yesterday asking what Ethan's favorite wine was for a company event. The woman who had been in our home smiled to my face, all while sleeping with my husband. "You've been having an affair?" The room seemed to tilt slightly, the carefully arranged anniversary dinner blurring before my eyes. "For how long?" "That's not important," Ethan dismissed, checking his watch. "What matters is that I'm moving forward, and you need to as well. I've had my lawyer draw up divorce papers. They're fair, more than fair, considering the prenup you signed." The prenup. The document I'd signed without much thought, believing our love was unshakable, believing that we were truly partners in life. The document that protected his assets, his future earnings, his company shares, while leaving me with almost nothing. "You can stay here tonight," he continued, as if he were doing me a favor. "But I'll need you gone by the end of the week. The apartment is in my name, as you know." I stared at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. How had I missed it? The gradual transformation from the ambitious but loving man I'd married to this cold, calculating person before me. Had he always been this way and I'd simply been too blinded by love to see it? "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "That's not my problem anymore," Ethan replied, already turning away. "I have a dinner meeting with the Blackwell team. Don't wait up." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me standing in his dining room, surrounded by the remnants of an anniversary that would never be celebrated. The candles flickered in the sudden draft from the closing door, casting dancing shadows across the walls of the life I thought I had secured. It was in that moment, watching the flame distort and bend but refuse to extinguish, that something shifted inside me. The initial shock gave way to something else, something harder and more resolute. If Ethan thought he could discard me so easily, if he believed I would simply fade away while he built his empire with another woman by his side, he was sorely mistaken. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Mason?" "It's Madeline. Yes, it's been a long time. Listen, I need your help with something. How much do you know about Meridian Tech Solutions and their upcoming merger with Blackwell Industries?" As I spoke, a plan began to form. Not just a plan for survival, but a strategy for something far more satisfying. Justice. Ethan had taken everything from me, but he had forgotten one crucial detail. He had taught me everything I needed to know about his business, about his weaknesses, about the empire he'd prioritized over our marriage. And I was about to put those lessons to very good use. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. All right, let's get back to it. 3 days after Ethan shattered my world, I found myself in a sterile, extended-stay hotel room, surrounded by hastily packed suitcases. The beige walls and generic artwork were a stark contrast to the carefully curated home I'd been forced to leave behind. My wedding photos, the vintage record collection we'd built together, even the handcrafted pottery from our honeymoon in Tazantitian, Santorini, all gone with only a few essential items rescued before Ethan changed the locks. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone as it buzzed with another message from Olivia. She'd been offering her guest room since I told her about Ethan's betrayal, but I couldn't bear the thought of my nieces and nephews seeing me this way, hollow-eyed and broken. Better to lick my wounds in private. The divorce papers had arrived. By courier that morning. I hadn't opened the envelope yet. It sat on the desk like a ticking bomb. Ethan had always been efficient, especially when it came to destroying things. A knock at the door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone, and few people knew where I was staying. When I peered through the peephole, I was surprised to see Mason Winters standing there, his tall frame almost too large for the narrow hallway. "You look terrible," were his first words when I opened the door. Typical Mason, blunt as ever. "Wonderful to see you too," I replied dryly, stepping aside to let him in. Mason and I had attended Cornell together. He'd been my study partner, my closest friend, and briefly, very briefly, something more. But our paths had diverged after graduation when he took a position with Rivington Capital, a boutique investment firm with a reputation for aggressive acquisitions. We'd kept in touch sporadically, but it had been over a year since we'd last spoken. "I brought sustenance," he said, holding up a bag that smelled deliciously of Indian food. "And information." My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten properly in days. I cleared a space on the small desk as Mason unpacked containers of butter chicken, naan, and saag paneer. "Eat first," he insisted, handing me a plate. "Then we talk." I didn't argue. For the next 20 minutes, we ate in companionable silence, Mason tactfully avoiding staring at my puffy eyes or the chaos of my temporary living situation. It was only when we'd finished that he pulled out his tablet and got down to business. "So, Meridian Tech Solutions," he began, his voice shifting into the analytical tone I remembered from our study sessions. "Currently in the final stages of acquiring Blackwell Industries, creating what would be the 5th largest tech solutions provider in the country." I nodded, swallowing the painful lump in my throat. "Ethan's been working toward this merger for over a year. It's his big breakthrough. And your ex-to-be is positioned to become CFO of the combined companies," Mason continued, swiping through documents on his tablet. "It's a significant jump for someone his age." "He's always been ambitious," I said quietly, remembering the late nights, the missed anniversaries, the constant phone calls that interrupted our rare moments together. "It's why I supported him so completely. I believed in him." Mason's expression softened momentarily before returning to its professional mask. "Well, here's where it gets interesting. The merger isn't as solid as Ethan might believe." My heart quickened. "What do you mean?" "Blackwell Industries looks impressive on paper, but my team at Rivington has been investigating them for a potential acquisition ourselves. There are discrepancies in their financial reports. Nothing obvious, nothing that would trigger regulatory concerns, but enough to raise eyebrows among those who know what to look for." I leaned forward, my personal pain momentarily eclipsed by curiosity. Before I'd set aside my career to support Ethan, I'd specialized in financial analysis. "Show me." For the next hour, Mason walked me through the subtle irregularities in Blackwell's quarterly reports, inventory valuations that didn't quite add up, revenue recognition that seemed accelerated, capitalized costs that should have been expensed. None of it was outright fraud, but together, they painted a picture of a company that wasn't quite as profitable as its glossy annual report suggested. If these issues come to light during the final due diligence phase, the merger could fall apart, Mason explained, or at minimum, The terms would need to be significantly renegotiated. And Ethan would lose his shot at CFO, I said, the implications dawning on me. His big career advancement would evaporate. Mason nodded, a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. Exactly. I stood up and paced the small room, my mind racing. But why are you showing me this? What's your angle? Rivington wants Blackwell too, but not through a merger. We want to acquire them outright, restructure, and then sell off the parts that don't align with our portfolio. But we need to move before the Meridian deal is finalized. I stopped pacing and stared at him. And where do I fit into this? Mason's smile was slow and deliberate. You know Meridian from the inside. You've attended their corporate events, socialized with their board members. Most importantly, you understand their financial structure in ways that could be advantageous to us. You want me to help you sabotage my husband's merger, I said flatly. Ex-husband, Mason corrected. And no, not sabotage. We simply want to present Blackwell's board with a superior offer, one that highlights the true value of their company, warts and all, while still being more attractive than Meridian's current bid. I sank back onto the bed, my emotions a turbulent mix of temptation and hesitation. Using my insider knowledge felt wrong, yet the image of Ethan and Vanessa celebrating their professional and personal victory while I rebuilt my life from scratch made my blood boil. I don't know, Mason. This feels like crossing a line. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Madeline, do you know what was in those divorce papers you haven't opened yet? Because I can tell you. Ethan's lawyer called our firm for advice on how to structure the settlement. My blood ran cold. What? He's offering you the bare minimum required by your prenup. No alimony, no stake in the assets acquired during your marriage, not even the art collection you curated. Meanwhile, he's arranged for Vanessa to receive a significant promotion and equity package once the merger goes through. The room seemed to spin around me as rage, hot and clarifying, surged through my veins. 3 years of my life, my career, put on hold, my identity subsumed into his. And this was how he valued my contribution? He did what? I whispered, my voice deadly quiet. Mason reached across and took my hand, his touch grounding me as the magnitude of Ethan's betrayal fully registered. You have a choice, Maddie. You can walk away with nothing but your dignity, or you can help us acquire Blackwell while securing your own future in the process. Rivington is prepared to offer you a consulting position with compensation that includes a percentage of the acquisition value. I pulled my hand away and walked to the window, staring out at the anonymous city streets below. The woman reflected dimly in the glass looked different somehow. Harder, more determined, with a glint in her eye that hadn't been there before. What exactly would I need to do? I asked, turning back to face Mason. His smile widened. For starters, we need to understand Meridian's vulnerabilities. Their bid is aggressive, but every company has weak spots, especially ones pushing for rapid expansion. I thought about the countless dinners I'd hosted, the conversations I'd facilitated between Ethan and his colleagues, the confidential documents I'd proofread for him when he was too tired to check for errors himself. I might know a few, I said slowly. Mason pulled out a business card and placed it on the desk. Rivington's offer isn't just about money, Madeline. It's about reclaiming your power. Think about it overnight, but don't wait too long. Once the merger enters its final phase, our window of opportunity closes. After he left, I finally opened the divorce papers. Everything Mason had said was true, and worse. Ethan hadn't just minimized my settlement. He'd included clauses to prevent me from seeking employment with any of Meridian's competitors or partners for 2 years. He was effectively cutting me off from my industry expertise while he thrived. That night, I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and began typing notes. Everything I remembered about Meridian's acquisition strategy, their financing structure, and most importantly, the pressure points that kept Ethan awake at night. By morning, I had 10 pages of detailed information and a newfound clarity. I called Mason at 6 a.m. "I'm in," I said when he answered. "But I want more than a consulting position." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What did you have in mind?" I took a deep breath, surprised by my own audacity. When Rivington acquires Blackwell, I want to be part of the management team, and I want Ethan to know exactly who helped make it happen. Mason's laugh was appreciative. "Now that's the Madeline. Montgomery I remember from Cornell. Let's meet for breakfast and discuss the details." As I hung up, I caught my reflection again. And this time, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Her eyes were clear, her posture straight, her expression resolute. Ethan had made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated the woman. He was discarding. And he was about to learn just how costly that mistake would be. The headquarters of Rivington Capital occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming skyscraper in the financial district. As the elevator ascended, I smoothed down the navy pantsuit I'd splurged on despite my precarious financial situation. First impressions mattered, especially when you were about to propose upending a multi-million-dollar merger. "Nervous?" Mason asked, noting my fidgeting. "Terrified," I admitted. I've spent the last 3 years playing the supportive wife at corporate events. I'm not sure I remember how to be the ambitious analyst anymore. Mason's expression softened. "That woman never disappeared, Maddie. She just took a back seat for a while." The elevator doors opened onto a reception area where sleek, minimalist designs signaled serious money and serious intentions. A striking woman with silver-streaked hair rose from behind the reception desk. "Mr. Winters, Ms. Montgomery, Ms. Zhao is expecting you." We were led through an open office space, past glass-walled conference rooms where analysts hunched over multiple screens displaying financial data, and into a corner office with panoramic views of the city. Victoria Zhao didn't stand when we entered. She remained seated behind her imposing desk, sharp eyes appraising me from behind tortoiseshell glasses. At 62, she was a legend in the financial sector, one of the few women to break into the upper echelons of corporate acquisitions, and remain there for over 3 decades. "So, you're Ethan Crawford's wife," she said without preamble. "Soon-to-be ex-wife," I corrected, refusing to break eye contact despite the intimidating scrutiny. A hint of a smile touched Victoria's lips. "Mason tells me you have information that could help us acquire Blackwell Industries from under Meridian's nose. I'm skeptical. Why would you help us torpedo your husband's career-making deal?" I placed my portfolio on her desk and sat down, uninvited. Because Ethan didn't just betray me as a husband. He's attempting to legally cripple my career while he profits from the knowledge and connections I helped him build. Victoria's eyebrow arched slightly. "Revenge, then." "Justice," I countered. "And self-preservation." She gestured impatiently. "Show me what you have." For the next 40 minutes, I walked Victoria through the detailed analysis I'd prepared. Meridian's financing structure for the merger, the pressure points in their negotiations with Blackwell, and the timing vulnerabilities that could be exploited. "Ethan confides in me when he's stressed," I explained, pointing to a specific clause in the acquisition agreement. "This earnout provision is particularly important to Blackwell's founder, Gregory Blackwell. He's emotionally attached to the R&D division. It's where he started 30 years ago. If the division is dismantled or its funding cut after acquisition, the final payment to him decreases substantially." Victoria leaned forward, suddenly more engaged. "And Meridian plans to, consolidate R&D operations?" I nodded. "It's not in the public merger documents, but Ethan mentioned it repeatedly. They're planning to reduce R&D headcount by 40% within 6 months of closing to achieve their synergy targets." Victoria and Mason exchanged glances. "That's consistent with what our sources have indicated," Mason confirmed. I flipped to the next page of my analysis. There's more. Meridian's financing for this deal is heavily dependent on their stock price remaining above $42 per share. Any significant drop would force them to renegotiate terms with their lenders, potentially delaying closing. Victoria's eyes narrowed. How certain are you about this information? I heard Ethan discussing it with their CFO at our dining room table last month. He was concerned about market volatility affecting the deal timeline. I met her gaze steadily. I might have been relegated to hostess and wife, Ms. Zhao, but I have an MBA from Cornell and specialized in M&A analysis. I understand what I overheard. Victoria sat back, studying me with new interest. And what exactly do you want in return for this information, Ms. Montgomery? A position at Rivington post-acquisition, focusing on the integration of Blackwell's viable divisions, a significant bonus tied to the success of the acquisition, and I hesitated, then forged ahead. I want to be present when you present the offer to Blackwell's board. That last request is unusual, Victoria noted. I spent 3 years being invisible while contributing to my husband's success. I'm done being invisible. Victoria was silent for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a sharp, startling sound in the austere office. I like you, Montgomery. You remind me of myself 30 years ago. She turned to Mason. Set up a proper consulting agreement and NDA for Ms. Montgomery. I want her working with the acquisition team immediately. Mason nodded, looking pleased. Victoria rose, indicating our meeting was over, but as I gathered my materials, she stopped me with a hand on my arm. A word of advice, she said quietly, her expression serious. Corporate acquisitions are like chess, not boxing. The goal isn't to draw blood, it's to outmaneuver your opponent so thoroughly that they never see the checkmate coming. Her words followed me as Mason led me to my new temporary office, a small but well-appointed space on the floor below Victoria's. On the desk sat a laptop, security badge, and a stack of folders stamped, Confidential Project Checkmate. Victoria doesn't waste time, Mason explained. You're officially part of the Blackwell acquisition team. I picked up the security badge with my hastily taken photo. That was intense. Victoria doesn't suffer fools, but she recognizes talent. Your analysis impressed her, and that's not easy to do. Mason leaned against the door frame. The team will be meeting in conference room C in an hour to discuss strategy. I'd suggest reviewing those files before then. After he left, I sank into the ergonomic chair, my emotions swinging between vindication and disbelief. Just a week ago, I'd been arranging flowers for my anniversary dinner, believing my biggest concern was convincing Ethan to start a family. Now I was plotting to help a rival firm snatch away the deal that defined his career ambitions. The magnitude of what I was undertaking suddenly hit me, and doubt crept in. Was I really capable of this? Was I allowing bitterness to drive me towards something I'd regret? A soft knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. I looked up to see Victoria Zhao standing in my doorway. Second thoughts already? She asked, her perceptiveness unnerving. I straightened. Just processing how quickly things have changed. Victoria entered and closed the door behind her. When I was 32, I discovered my business partner, who was also my fiancé, had been systematically cutting me out of our firm while using my family connections to secure our biggest clients. I blinked, surprised by the personal revelation. He believed I would be too emotionally devastated to fight back, Victoria continued, her voice matter of fact. He miscalculated. I didn't just fight back. I rebuilt my career on the foundation of his mistake. She moved to the window, looking out at the city below. The business world is particularly unforgiving to women who show weakness. Ms. Montgomery, your husband discarded you because he thought you were an accessory to his success rather than a driving force behind it. That's his error. What did you do? I asked. To your fiancé? A small, satisfied smile curved Victoria's lips. I used my knowledge of his methods to secure financing he didn't know about. Then, I approached our 3 largest clients directly and brought them with me to start Rivington. He was bankrupt within 18 months. She turned back to me, her expression serious again. But I didn't do it out of pure vengeance. I did it because I knew I was better at this than he was, because I refused to let his betrayal define my career or my life. Victoria moved to the door, then paused. Ask yourself this, Madeline. If Ethan hadn't betrayed you personally, if he'd only been a business rival, would you still believe this acquisition was the right move based on the financials and market position? The question struck me like a physical blow. I forced myself to consider it objectively, reviewing the numbers and strategic analysis I'd prepared. Yes, I said finally. Meridian is overpaying for Blackwell based on inflated projections, and their integration plan ignores key cultural factors that will cause talent retention problems. It's a poorly structured deal driven more by ego than business logic. Victoria nodded, seemingly satisfied. Then proceed with confidence. Your motivation may include personal justice, but your analysis should be impeccable. That's how you win in this world, not just through passion, but through precision. After she left, I opened the Project Checkmate folders and began to read, Victoria's words echoing in my mind. This wasn't just about hurting Ethan or reclaiming what he'd taken from me. It was about proving, to him, to myself, and to the world, that I was a force to be reckoned with in my own right. By the time I joined the acquisition team meeting an hour later, my resolve had hardened into determination. I wasn't just Ethan Crawford's discarded wife anymore. I was Madeline Montgomery, financial analyst and strategic advisor to Rivington Capital, and I was about to change the game entirely. As I took my seat at the conference table, surrounded by sharp-minded analysts and seasoned dealmakers, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt powerful. Not as someone's wife or supporter, but as a professional with valuable insights. Victoria caught my eye across the table and gave me an almost imperceptible nod. The message was clear. I belonged here, and it was time to prove it. The lead analyst, a brusque man named Terrence, began the meeting by outlining Rivington's initial acquisition approach. Our current valuation puts Blackwell at approximately 15% below Meridian's offer, he explained. We need to find angles that make our bid more attractive despite the lower number. I took a deep breath and raised my hand. I believe I can help. With that, all eyes turned to me, the newcomer, some curious and others skeptical. Victoria nodded for me to continue. It was time to step out of the shadows and into the light. Time to reclaim not just my professional identity, but my power. And fittingly, I would do it by using everything Ethan had inadvertently taught me about the business he prized above our marriage. 2 weeks into my position at Rivington Capital, I found myself working later than anyone else, the office floor dark except for the light from my computer screen. Spreadsheets and financial models stretched across dual monitors as I refined our approach to Gregory Blackwell, the founder who still held significant sway over his company's board of directors. I rubbed my tired eyes, realizing I'd forgotten to eat dinner again. My temporary apartment, a corporate housing unit Rivington provided, remained mostly empty, with takeout containers the only evidence I actually lived there. I'd been throwing myself into work with an intensity that surprised even Mason. You need to pace yourself, he'd warned earlier that day. This is a marathon, not a sprint. But the truth was, I needed this all-consuming focus. Every hour spent dissecting Blackwell's financials or analyzing Meridian's weaknesses was an hour I didn't spend dwelling on the humiliation Ethan had inflicted. Work was my refuge, my purpose, and increasingly, my identity. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Haven't heard from you in days. Are you still alive? Guilt pricked at me. I'd been avoiding my sister's calls, unwilling to admit how thoroughly I'd immersed myself in plotting what amounted to corporate revenge. Olivia wouldn't understand. She'd worry that I was letting bitterness consume me. Was she right? The question lingered as I shut down my computer and gathered my things. In the elevator down to the parking garage, I caught my reflection in the polished metal doors. Designer suit, perfectly coiffed hair, expression set in determined lines. I looked like a stranger to myself. 3 months ago, I'd been planning anniversary surprises and dreaming of starting a family. Now I was weaponizing insider knowledge to destroy my husband's career ambitions. The contrast was jarring. The garage was eerily quiet as I made my way to my car, heels echoing against concrete. As I fumbled for my keys, a familiar voice froze. "Me in place." "Working late, Maddie?" Ethan stood beside my car, leaning casually against the driver's side door as if he had every right to be there. His tailored suit and confident stance were so familiar it made my chest ache with muscle memory. "How did you get in here?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I have connections." He shrugged. "And I wanted to talk to you directly, since you've been ignoring my lawyer's calls." I gripped my purse tighter, anger displacing shock. "I have nothing to say to you or your lawyer. Everything will go through my attorney from now on." Ethan sighed dramatically. Always so stubborn. "Is that why you've decided to work for Rivington? To spite me?" So he knew. The knowledge that my involvement with Rivington had gotten back to him brought a surprising flutter of satisfaction. "I'm working for Rivington because they recognize my value," I replied coolly. "Something you evidently failed to do." His laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Come on, Maddie. We both know what you're trying to do. It won't work. The Blackwell deal is locked up tight." "Is it?" I raised an eyebrow, refusing to be intimidated. "Then why are you here, accosting me in a parking garage? A flicker of something? Uncertainty? Concern?" Crossed his face before his mask of confidence returned. "Just looking out for you. Victoria Zhao has a reputation for using people and discarding them." Sound familiar? The attempt to draw a parallel between himself and Victoria was so transparent, it was almost laughable. The difference is that Victoria has been upfront about what she wants from me. She's also compensating me fairly for my expertise. "Expertise," Ethan repeated, his tone making the word an insult. "Let's be honest about what you're really bringing to the table, Maddie. Information. My information. Information you were privy to as my wife." There it was, the crux of his concern. Not my well-being, not regret over our broken marriage, but fear that I might use what I knew against him. "Interesting that you're worried about that," I observed, a newfound calm settling over me. "Do you have something to hide, Ethan?" He pushed off the car and stepped toward me, close enough that I could smell his familiar cologne. "This isn't a game, Madeline. There are serious legal implications if you share confidential information about Meridian. You signed a non-disclosure agreement when you attended company events." The threat was thinly veiled, but it confirmed what I already suspected. Ethan was worried, and that meant we were on the right track. "I'm well aware of my legal obligations," I replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Now, please move away from my car." For a moment I thought he might refuse. Then he stepped aside, his movements deliberately slow. "Think carefully about what you're doing, Maddie. You're out of your depth here." I unlocked my car and opened the door, creating a barrier between us. "No, Ethan. For the first time in 3 years, I'm exactly where I need to be." His expression hardened. "Vanessa and I are getting married after the merger closes. Did you know that? We're announcing it at the celebration gala." The words struck like a physical blow, but I refused to show it. "Congratulations. I hope she's better at being your prop than I was." "She understands ambition," Ethan countered. "She doesn't resent my success." "I never resented your success, Ethan. I resented that you achieved it by standing on my shoulders, while convincing me and yourself that I was just along for the ride." I slid into the driver's seat. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." As I drove away, I watched him shrink in my rearview mirror, a solitary figure in an empty garage. The encounter had shaken me, but not in the way Ethan had intended. Instead of intimidation, I felt an unexpected clarity washing over me. For 3 years, I'd subsumed my identity into his, believing that supporting his ambitions was the same as pursuing my own. I'd accepted his narrative that my career aspirations were secondary, that my greatest contribution would be facilitating his success. And when he'd discarded me, my first impulse had been revenge, to hurt him as he'd hurt me. But as I drove through the quiet nighttime streets, I realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming the woman I'd been before Ethan, ambitious, sharp, confident in my own abilities, and becoming an even stronger version of her. Victoria's question echoed in my mind. If Ethan hadn't betrayed you personally, if he'd only been a business rival, would you still believe this acquisition was the right move? The answer remained yes, and that knowledge steadied me. I wasn't just lashing out in pain. I was making sound business decisions that happened to conflict with Ethan's interests. By the time I reached my apartment, I felt strangely energized despite the late hour. I kicked off my heels and went directly to my laptop, opening the presentation I'd been refining for our approach to Gregory Blackwell. The current draft was good, solid financial analysis presented with precision. But it was missing something. Crucial. Gregory wasn't just a businessman looking to maximize value. He was a founder concerned about his legacy and the research division he'd built from nothing. I started a new slide, typing rapidly as insight flowed. Rivington's commitment to Blackwell's innovation legacy. Under Victoria's guidance, I'd learned that acquisitions weren't just about numbers. They were about understanding the human motivations driving key decision-makers. Around 2 a.m., I finally stepped back from the completed presentation. It wasn't just a counteroffer to Meridian's bid. It was a vision for preserving Blackwell's innovation culture while enhancing its market position. We were offering slightly less money but significantly more security for the elements Gregory truly valued. As I finally crawled into bed, exhausted but satisfied, I realized that for the first time since Ethan's betrayal, I hadn't fallen asleep, crying. Instead, I felt a strange, unfamiliar peace. My phone buzzed with a text. Expecting Olivia again, I was surprised to see Victoria's name. Board meeting with Blackwell scheduled for Thursday. Be prepared to present personally. This is your show now. A thrill ran through me, part excitement, part terror. Victoria was entrusting me with a crucial role in a multi-million-dollar acquisition. This wasn't just busy work to keep the jilted wife occupied. This was genuine professional responsibility. I stared at the ceiling, processing this turn of events. Ethan had seen me as an accessory to his success, but Victoria saw me as instrumental to hers. The contrast couldn't be clearer. In that moment of quiet revelation, something cracked open inside me, a space where new possibility rushed in. I'd been defining myself in relation to Ethan for so long. First as his supportive wife, then as his vindictive ex. But there was another identity waiting to be claimed, one that had nothing to do with him at all. Madeline Montgomery, strategic advisor, acquisition specialist, businesswoman in her own right. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. I'd begun this journey seeking revenge, but I was continuing it for something far more valuable: self-reclamation. Every spreadsheet analyzed, every strategy developed, every presentation delivered was a step toward becoming the woman I was always meant to be, before I'd allowed myself to be diminished. As sleep finally claimed me, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. Ethan had done me a favor. In discarding me so callously, he'd inadvertently freed me to become his most formidable opponent. Not because I hated him, but because I finally remembered how to value myself. The alarm jarred me awake at 5:30 a.m. I dressed with particular Care selecting a crimson blazer over a black sheath dress, power colors for a pivotal day. Today, we would present our acquisition strategy to Victoria and the full executive team before taking it to Blackwell's board. As I applied my makeup, I studied my reflection. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the one who'd arranged flowers and chilled champagne for an anniversary celebration just weeks ago. Her eyes were sharper, her jawline more determined. She looked like someone who knew exactly what she wanted and exactly how to get it. I smiled at her, this stranger who was also me, and felt a surge of something I hadn't experienced in years. Pride. Not in relation to someone else's achievements, but in my own capabilities. Ready or not, I whispered to my reflection, here I come. And for the first time since Ethan had shattered my world, I truly believed those words. Blackwell Industries' headquarters occupied a restored industrial building on the outskirts of the city, its brick exterior belying the cutting-edge technology developed within. As our convoy of Blacktown cars pulled into the visitors' parking area, I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. Nervous? Mason asked from the seat beside me, echoing the same question he'd asked weeks earlier in the elevator at Rivington. This time, my answer was different. No, I replied, surprised to find it was true. I'm ready. Victoria, seated across from us, gave a small nod of approval. Remember what we discussed. Gregory Blackwell built his company from nothing. He respects people who speak with authority and know their worth. I smoothed my crimson blazer, the leather portfolio containing our presentation cool against my fingers. After 3 days of intense preparation, including rigorous practice sessions where Victoria and her team had grilled me mercilessly, I knew our offer inside and out. More importantly, I believed in it. The Blackwell boardroom was imposing in its simplicity. A massive table of polished walnut surrounded by ergonomic chairs, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the company's sprawling research campus. Gregory Blackwell rose as we entered, his tall frame still athletic despite his 70 years. The white hair and weathered face did nothing to diminish the sharpness of his gaze as he assessed each of us in turn. "Victoria," he greeted, shaking, her hand firmly. "It's been, 5 years?" "6," she corrected with a rare smile. "The Singapore Technology Conference." "Ah, yes." His eyes twinkled with the memory. "You outbid me for that security software company. Cost me a fortune to develop our own version. A sound, strategic decision in the end," Victoria responded smoothly. "Your in-house solution won the government contract we'd been targeting. Their exchange fascinated me. 2 industry veterans who had competed and respected each other for decades, their relationship transcending any single deal. It was business at its highest level, where rivalries existed alongside genuine admiration." Victoria gestured to me. "This is Madeline Montgomery, our strategic advisor for this acquisition. She'll be leading our presentation today." Gregory's eyebrows rose slightly as he turned to me. "Montgomery? Any relation to Crawford Montgomery from Meridian Tech? I met..." His gaze directly. "Ethan Crawford is my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband." A momentary surprise crossed his face, followed by a calculating look. "Interesting. And you're advising Rivington on acquiring my company, a deal your husband's firm is also pursuing." "Yes," I said simply, offering no explanation or apology. For a tense moment, Gregory studied me, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. "Well, that should make today's meeting considerably more interesting. Please, let's begin." We took our seats as Blackwell's executive team filed in. I recognized several faces from industry events I'd attended with Ethan, and I could see the confusion and curiosity in their expressions as they placed me. Let them wonder, I thought. By the end of this presentation, they'd understand exactly who I was. Victoria opened with a brief overview of Rivington's interest in Blackwell, her tone striking the perfect balance between confidence and respect. Then she turned the floor over to me, As I stood and moved to the front of the room, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This moment, standing before a room full of executives to present a multi-million-dollar acquisition strategy, should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like coming home. "Gentleman, lady," I began, acknowledging the sole female executive on Blackwell's team. Rivington's interest in acquiring Blackwell Industries is rooted in two fundamental beliefs. First, that Blackwell's research division represents the future of integrated security solutions, and second, that the current market undervalues the long-term potential of this innovation. I advanced to the first slide of my presentation, which contrasted Meridian's offer with Rivington's. As you can see, Meridian's bid is approximately 15% higher than ours in total consideration. If price were the only factor in this decision, our meeting would be very short. A few chuckles rippled through the room. Gregory Blackwell leaned forward. Slightly, his interest piqued. "However," I continued, "there are significant differences in structure and strategic vision that warrant your careful consideration." For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through our analysis, highlighting the key differentiators in our approach. Where Meridian offered more cash up front, but tied earnouts to aggressive cost-cutting measures, we proposed a structure that rewarded revenue growth and successful product launches. Where Meridian planned to integrate Blackwell's operations into their existing business units, we presented a vision of Blackwell as a semi-autonomous division within Rivington, preserving its culture and innovation pipeline. Most importantly, I said, advancing to what I considered the centerpiece of our proposal, we are prepared to commit contractually to maintaining current R&D investment levels for a minimum of 5 years, with increases tied to performance, metrics that your team would help design. I glanced at Gregory, whose expression had grown increasingly attentive. "Mr. Blackwell, we understand that the research division represents not just a business asset, but a legacy. Your legacy. Our commitment is to grow that legacy, not dismantle it for short-term gains." A slight shift in his posture told me the message had landed. I moved through the remaining slides, addressing potential concerns and outlining our integration timeline. "Conclusion," I said, returning to the comparison slide. "Meridian is offering more money for what they see as a strategic acquisition. Rivington is offering a partnership that preserves what makes Blackwell Industries exceptional while providing the capital and distribution network to take your innovations to a global scale." I returned to my seat as Victoria smoothly took over, opening the floor for questions. The discussion that followed was rigorous, with Blackwell's team probing every assumption and commitment in our proposal. Throughout it all, I felt Gregory's eyes returning to me repeatedly, assessing something beyond the financial details. When Victoria deftly fielded a particularly complex question about international regulatory approvals, he leaned toward me. "Ms. Montgomery," he said quietly, "might I ask why you're involved in this particular acquisition? Of all the deals Rivington must be pursuing, why this one?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. The prepared answer, that I specialized in technology sector valuations, hovered on my lips, but something in Gregory's expression demanded honesty. "Because I believe Meridian is the wrong partner for Blackwell," I replied, matching his quiet tone. "Their integration plan prioritizes short-term earnings over long-term innovation. They'll dismantle what makes your company valuable in the name of synergy." His eyes narrowed. "And you know this how?" We both knew the answer, but speaking it aloud would cross an ethical line. Instead, I said, "I know how Meridian operates. I've seen their approach to acquisitions firsthand, Mr. Blackwell. They buy companies for their client lists and immediate technology, not for their research potential or culture." He studied me for a long moment. "And your personal connection to their CFO has nothing to do with your involvement?" "It has everything to do with my involvement," I admitted, surprising myself with my candor. "But not in the way you might think. My marriage ending forced me to reclaim my professional identity. This acquisition is my declaration that I'm more than just Ethan Crawford's discarded wife. I'm a financial analyst with insights your company needs to hear. The bluntness of my statement seemed to catch Gregory off guard. For a moment, his carefully maintained business persona slipped, revealing something like respect. "Well," he said finally, "at least you're honest about your motivations." "Always," I replied, holding his gaze. Our private exchange was interrupted as Victoria wrapped up the Q&A session. Gregory stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "Thank you for a comprehensive presentation," he said, addressing our entire team, but looking at me. "We have another meeting scheduled with Meridian tomorrow to review their final offer. The board will make its decision by the end of the week." As we gathered our materials, Gregory approached me directly. "Ms. Montgomery, a word in private?" Victoria gave me a subtle nod, and I followed Gregory to a small conference room adjacent to the boardroom. He closed the door and gestured for me to sit. "I've known Ethan Crawford for 5 years," he began without preamble. Ambitious, relentless, and utterly focused on his own advancement. I never understood how he had managed to secure a wife like you. I blinked, uncertain how to respond to the unexpected direction of the conversation. "I remember you from industry events," Gregory continued, "always insightful when drawn into technical discussions, yet consistently deferring to your husband. I found it puzzling." "I was playing a role I thought I was supposed to play," I admitted. "A mistake I won't repeat." He nodded slowly. "Your presentation today was exceptional. Not just the content, but the conviction behind it." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "Meridian's offer includes a position for me on their executive committee. Largely ceremonial, of course, but designed to suggest they value my continued involvement." "They don't," I said flatly. "It's a golden handcuff, nothing more." A faint smile crossed his face. "Yes, I suspected as much. What does Rivington offer in that regard?" "Nothing ceremonial," I replied. "We believe your expertise is genuinely valuable, particularly in guiding the R&D division through transition. Our offer includes a 3-year consulting agreement with substantive responsibilities, should you wish to remain involved. But we're not dangling titles to secure your agreement." Gregory's laugh was unexpected and genuine, refreshingly direct. "Victoria has trained you well." "Victoria hasn't trained me to say anything," I countered. "She's empowered me to speak the truth as I see it." He studied me for a long moment. "You know, Ms. Montgomery, revenge is rarely as satisfying as people hope it will be." "I'm not doing this for revenge, Mr. Blackwell." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm doing it because it's the right business decision for both our companies, and because proving my professional worth is the best response to being underestimated." Gregory extended his hand. "I look forward to the board's decision, Ms. Montgomery. Whatever the outcome, I suspect you have a significant career ahead of you." As I shook his hand, I felt a quiet certainty settle over me. Whatever happened with the acquisition, I had stood in that boardroom on my own merits and held my own with industry leaders. No one could take that away from me. Not Ethan, not the divorce, not the years I'd spent diminishing myself. I had declared my value, publicly and without apology. And in doing so, I had finally broken free of the narrative Ethan had constructed around me. As we rejoined the others, Victoria caught my eye with a questioning look. I gave her a small nod, and the subtle approval in her expression confirmed what I already felt. I had passed some essential test, not just with Gregory Blackwell, but with myself. The woman who walked out of Blackwell Industries that afternoon was not the same one who had stood arranging flowers for an anniversary dinner just weeks earlier. She was stronger, clearer in her purpose, and absolutely certain of one thing: she would never allow herself to be made invisible again. The 48 hours following our presentation to Blackwell's board were excruciating. I found myself checking my phone obsessively, jumping whenever it buzzed, only to be disappointed by routine emails or texts from Olivia, who was still trying to coax me into a family dinner I wasn't ready to face. Blackwell won't make a decision until they've heard Meridian's final pitch, Mason reminded me as we picked at a late dinner in the Rivington conference room. And Gregory is nothing if not methodical. I pushed my barely touched salad away. I know. I just can't stop thinking about all the ways Ethan might counter our offer. That's actually what we need to focus on, Victoria said, striding into the room with her characteristic purposeful energy. Despite the late hour, she looked impeccable in a charcoal suit, not a silver hair out of place. If we were Ethan Crawford, how would we respond to our presentation? She took a seat at the head of the table and fixed me with her penetrating gaze. Madeline, put yourself in your husband's shoes. You've just learned that Rivington is making a serious play for Blackwell, and that your soon-to-be ex-wife is spearheading the effort. What's your next move? I closed my eyes, trying to think like Ethan. He'll assume I've shared confidential information about Meridian's offer, so his first instinct will be legal, threatening me with an NDA violation. Has he already made that move? Victoria asked. Yes, in the parking garage. But it was a warning, not actual legal action. Ethan prefers to avoid messy public conflicts that might reflect poorly on him. Victoria nodded. So he'll save the legal threats as a last resort. What else? I thought about Ethan's playbook, the strategies I'd watched him employ over the years. He'll try to sweeten the financial terms, probably increase the upfront cash component since that's what most boards respond to. But his financing is already stretched thin, so there's a limit to how much more he can offer. What about the R&D division issue? Mason prompted. That was the centerpiece of our proposal. I tapped my fingers on the table, considering. He can't match our 5-year commitment to maintain R&D investment. It would undermine the entire financial rationale for Meridian's acquisition. But he might offer a longer transitional period before cuts, or promise to relocate key research staff, rather than eliminate positions. Victoria leaned forward. What's his weakness? The vulnerability you would exploit if you were competing against him? Ego, I said without hesitation. Ethan needs this deal to cement his position as CFO of the combined companies. It's not just a strategic acquisition for Meridian. It's personally essential to his career trajectory. And he's promised certain outcomes to his board, synergies that can only be achieved through significant cost-cutting. Which is exactly what Gregory Blackwell is concerned about, Mason noted. Precisely. I felt a surge of clarity. Ethan can't afford to adapt his integration plan to preserve what matters to Gregory, but he'll try to obscure that reality with immediate financial incentives. Victoria's smile was wolfish. So we need to make sure the board sees through those incentives to the reality underneath. How? I asked. We've already made our presentation. Gregory Blackwell isn't the only voice on that board, Victoria said. There are 7 other members, each with their own priorities and concerns. We need to understand what motivates each of them and address those factors directly. She turned to Mason. Get me detailed profiles of every board member by morning. Financial holdings, professional backgrounds, previous voting patterns on major decisions. Mason nodded and left to assemble the research team, leaving me alone with Victoria. You did well today, she said, surprising me with the direct compliment. Gregory called me after we left. He was impressed. A warm glow of pride spread through me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to lead the presentation. I didn't give you anything, Victoria corrected sharply. You earned it through your analysis and preparation. Never forget the difference. I nodded, absorbing the crucial distinction. Victoria hadn't bestowed a favor. She'd recognized value and leveraged it, exactly as I needed to do for myself moving forward. Now, she continued, we have 36 hours to prepare our final move. I want you to draft personalized addendums to our offer addressing the specific concerns of each board member. My eyes widened. Individualized offers? not separate offers. Strategic emphasis, Victoria clarified. The core deal remains the same, but we highlight different aspects for different decision-makers. The former McKinsey consultant cares about clean integration metrics. The retired engineering executive worries about talent retention. The venture capital representative focuses on maintaining innovation pipelines for future valuation growth. I understood immediately. It wasn't about changing the substance of our offer, but about framing it to address each board member's primary concerns, speaking directly to their values rather than assuming a one-size-fits-all approach. I'll need help with the research, I said, mentally calculating the work involved. You'll have it, but you're leading this effort because you understand both the technical details and the human elements at play. Victoria stood, signaling the end of our conversation. This is how deals are really won, Madeline, not just with numbers, but with insight into what drives people's decisions. The next day and a half passed in a blur of intense activity. I barely left the office, catching naps on the couch in Victoria's private suite when exhaustion overtook me. Mason's team delivered comprehensive profiles of each board member, and I worked with Rivington's analysts to craft tailored addendums emphasizing different aspects of our acquisition plan. For Janet Chen, the former McKinsey consultant, we developed detailed integration timelines with clear milestones and accountability measures. For Robert Hernandez, who had built Blackwell's engineering division before retiring to the board, we outlined specific retention incentives for key technical talent. For Thomas Wilson, the venture capitalist, we emphasized how preserving R&D would maximize future exit valuations for Rivington's eventual divestiture of certain Blackwell divisions. By the time Gregory Blackwell called Victoria to schedule a final meeting, we had created a comprehensive approach that addressed both the collective concerns of the board and the individual priorities of its members. They want us there tomorrow morning, Victoria announced after hanging up, and they've requested that you attend specifically, Madeline. A mixture of anxiety and anticipation coursed through me. Is that usual? No, Victoria admitted. But it's promising. They wouldn't ask for you if they weren't seriously considering our offer. That evening, as I finally returned to my corporate apartment to shower and change clothes, my phone rang, with an unfamiliar number. Madeline Montgomery, I answered, balancing the phone while sorting through my closet for a suit appropriate for what might be the most important meeting of my career. Ms. Montgomery, this is Gregory Blackwell. I froze, my heart suddenly pounding. Mr. Blackwell, I wasn't expecting to hear from you directly. I imagine not, he said, his tone impossible to read. I'm calling because I received a rather interesting visit from Ethan Crawford this afternoon. My grip on the phone tightened. Oh? Yes. He seemed quite concerned about your involvement with Rivington's offer. He suggested that you might have shared confidential Meridian information that gave Rivington an unfair advantage in the bidding process. I closed my eyes, unsurprised, but still stung by Ethan's tactical move. I see. He implied that Meridian might challenge the entire acquisition on legal grounds if we accept Rivington's offer, Gregory continued. Said it would be a shame if Blackwell's final transaction was mired in litigation. That sounds like Ethan, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Using threats when persuasion fails. Gregory's chuckle surprised me. Indeed, which is why I'm calling. I'd like to understand exactly what information you provided to Rivington and whether any of it came from confidential sources at Meridian. The moment of truth had arrived sooner than I'd expected. I took a deep breath, knowing my answer could determine not just the outcome of the acquisition but my professional future. Mr. Blackwell, I understand your concern. When I joined Rivington, I signed a detailed affidavit specifying that I would not share any confidential information obtained through my relationship with Ethan or Meridian. Victoria insisted on it, precisely to avoid this situation. Go on, he prompted when I paused. The insights I provided about Meridian's approach came from my professional analysis of their past acquisitions, which is public information, and my general knowledge of their business philosophy. I was careful never to disclose specific terms, numbers, or strategies that weren't publicly available. And yet your presentation anticipated their approach with remarkable accuracy, Gregory observed. Because I know how Ethan thinks, Mr. Blackwell. That's different from sharing confidential information. I understand his priorities and values because I was married to him for 3 years, not because I stole documents or violated legal agreements. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I believe you, Ms. Montgomery, but Ethan's threat of litigation remains a concern for our board. Legal battles, even baseless ones, can delay closings and damage reputations. My mind raced, searching for a solution. What if I recused myself from the final stages of the acquisition? Victoria could lead the closing team, and I could step back until the deal is completed. An admirable offer, but unnecessary, Gregory replied. I didn't call for your resignation, Ms. Montgomery. I called to warn you that Ethan is playing hardball and to suggest you come prepared tomorrow to address these concerns directly with our board. Relief flooded through me. I understand. Thank you for the heads up. One more thing, Gregory added, his tone softening slightly. Ethan mentioned your divorce proceedings are becoming contentious. He suggested that your involvement with Rivington was motivated by a desire to harm him financially, rather than by sound business judgment. Of course, Ethan would try to paint me as the vengeful ex-wife, using sexist stereotypes to undermine my professional credibility. It was so predictable it almost made me laugh. Mr. Blackwell, I won't pretend my personal history with Ethan didn't influence my decision to join Rivington, but my analysis of this acquisition is sound, and my commitment to ensuring its success is absolute. The board will need to decide whether the professional value I bring outweighs any concerns about my personal motivations. Well said, Gregory replied, and I could hear the approval in his voice. I'll see you tomorrow, Ms. Montgomery. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of my bed, absorbing the implications of the call. Ethan was fighting back exactly as I'd anticipated, attacking my credibility rather than adjusting his offer to address Blackwell's concerns. It was simultaneously gratifying to have predicted his move and infuriating to be facing it. I dialed Victoria immediately, updating her on Gregory's call and Ethan's tactics. We expected this, she said calmly. In fact, we can use it to our advantage. Ethan's attack on you personally rather than on the substance of our offer suggests he doesn't have a strong counter on the merits. How do we respond? I asked. You address it head on, Victoria replied. Acknowledge your personal connection to the situation, then pivot immediately to the business rationale. Transparency about potential conflicts of interest, followed by rock-solid analysis that stands on its own, regardless of that connection. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I can do that. I know you can, Victoria said. Now get some rest. Tomorrow will be decisive. But sleep proved elusive as I rehearsed what I would say to the board, anticipating their questions and Ethan's potential presence. By morning, I was running on adrenaline and determination, dressed in a navy suit that projected confidence and professionalism without being intimidating. As our car approached Blackwell headquarters for the second time, Mason squeezed my hand briefly. Whatever happens in there, you've already won. You're not Ethan's wife anymore. You're his equal competitor. Don't forget that. His words steadied me as we walked into the building, ready for whatever came next. The board was waiting, and so, I suspected, was Ethan. The confrontation I'd been preparing for since the night he'd discarded me was finally at hand. The Blackwell boardroom felt different this time, charged with an almost palpable tension. The executive team was arranged along one side of the massive walnut table, with Gregory Blackwell at the center. But what immediately caught my attention was Ethan, seated confidently at the opposite end, flanked by Meridian's CEO, Richard Harrington, and a woman I recognized instantly as Vanessa. Our eyes met across the room, and Ethan's expression shifted from surprise to cold fury. He clearly hadn't expected me to be part of this final meeting. Vanessa leaned over to whisper something in his ear, her hand possessively on his arm, her gaze challenging me directly. I lifted my chin slightly and took my seat between Victoria and Mason, refusing to show any reaction to their staged intimacy. This wasn't about our broken marriage anymore. It was about business, strategy, and my professional credibility. Gregory Blackwell opened the meeting with characteristic directness. Thank you all for joining us today. After careful consideration of both offers, the board has additional questions before making our final decision. We've taken the unusual step of inviting both Rivington and Meridian to address these questions directly. He turned toward me. Ms. Montgomery, in the interest of transparency, Meridian has raised concerns about your involvement in Rivington's bid, given your personal connection to Mr. Crawford. The board would like you to address those concerns. Could feel every eye in the room on me, measuring my response. This was the moment Victoria and I had prepared for, the direct confrontation with the conflict of interest Ethan was using to undermine our offer. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I appreciate the opportunity to address this directly. Yes, Ethan Crawford and I are in divorce proceedings after 3 years of marriage, and yes, that personal history initially drew my attention to this particular acquisition. Ethan's smirk was subtle but unmistakable. He thought I was walking into his trap. However, I continued, my analysis of why Rivington is the superior partner for Blackwell is based on public information, industry knowledge, and financial expertise, not on confidential details from my marriage. When I joined Rivington, I signed a legal affidavit confirming that I would not share non-public information obtained through my relationship with Mr. Crawford or Meridian. I turned slightly to face the board members directly. I understand your concern about potential litigation. No company wants its acquisition mired in legal challenges. But I believe Mr. Crawford's suggestion that my involvement somehow taints this process is not just incorrect, it's a deliberate attempt to distract from the substantive differences between our offers. I placed the personalized addendums we'd prepared on the table. These materials address the specific concerns each of you raised during our previous meeting. They demonstrate why Rivington's approach preserves what makes Blackwell valuable while providing the capital needed for expansion. I'm happy to walk through them in detail, or to recuse myself from this meeting if the board believes that would be appropriate. The directness of my offer seemed to catch the board members off guard. They exchanged glances, clearly not having expected me to put my own participation on the table. Gregory broke the silence. That won't be necessary, Ms. Montgomery. We invited you here specifically because your presentation was compelling. We simply needed to address the concern directly. If I may, Ethan interjected, his voice carrying that smooth, persuasive tone I'd heard him use in countless negotiations. While I appreciate Ms. Montgomery's statement, the fact remains that she had access to confidential information about Meridian's bid through our marriage. Whether she explicitly shared documents is almost beside the point. Her knowledge inherently creates an unfair advantage for Rivington. Richard Harrington, Meridian's CEO, nodded in agreement. Our concern is the integrity of the bidding process. If Blackwell accepts Rivington's offer under these circumstances, shareholders could rightfully question whether they received full and fair value. It was a clever angle, shifting from threatening litigation to suggesting the board might be failing their fiduciary duty. I could see uncertainty flickering across some board members' faces. Victoria leaned forward. If I may address that point, Mr. Blackwell, Rivington's bid was formulated before Ms. Montgomery joined our team. Her contributions refined our integration approach, particularly regarding R&D preservation, but the fundamental valuation was established independently. Janet Chen, the former McKinsey consultant on Blackwell's board, frowned slightly. That may be true for the initial bid, Ms. Zhao, but the personalized addendums Ms. Montgomery just referenced clearly reflect her involvement. The conversation, was slipping away from us exactly as Ethan had planned. I needed to regain control of the narrative before his strategy succeeded. "Board members," I said, cutting through the developing crosstalk, "may I ask a direct question of Mr. Crawford?" Gregory looked surprised but nodded. "Go ahead." I turned to face Ethan directly for the first time. "Ethan, if Meridian acquires Blackwell, what happens to the R&D division's budget in year 2 post-acquisition?" His expression hardened. "That's proprietary information about our integration plan." "Is it? Or is it simply the question you're trying to avoid answering directly to this board?" I pressed. "Because the publicly available data on Meridian's last 3 acquisitions shows an average 42% reduction in R&D spending by the second year, a pattern consistent across different sectors and company sizes." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Each acquisition is unique, Madeline. You know that." "I do know that," I agreed, deliberately using his formal name to maintain professional distance. "Which is why I'd like you to tell this board, specifically, what protections your offer includes for the R&D division that Gregory Blackwell built over 30 years. Not vague assurances, but contractual commitments." The room fell silent. I had pushed Ethan into exactly the corner we'd planned, forcing him to either lie to the board or admit that Meridian's financial model depended on significant cost-cutting in the very division Gregory valued most. Ethan glanced at Richard, who gave a slight nod. "Our offer includes a 1-year transition period with current R&D funding levels, followed by a strategic reassessment of research priorities. We believe this approach allows for thoughtful integration rather than arbitrary preservation of legacy projects." It was expertly phrased corporate speak that completely confirmed my accusation. Several board members shifted uncomfortably as the implications became clear. Robert Hernandez, the retired engineering executive, leaned forward. "So there are no contractual protections for R&D funding beyond the first year?" "We don't believe in binding future leadership to specific budget allocations that might not make sense as market conditions evolve," Richard replied smoothly. "That would be irresponsible financial management." "I see," Robert said quietly, making a note on his legal pad. Victoria sensed the opening and moved in gracefully. "In contrast, our offer includes the 5-year R&D investment commitment detailed in our presentation, with clear metrics and milestones developed in partnership with Blackwell's current research leadership. We believe innovation requires consistent investment and patience, qualities that have made Blackwell an industry leader under Mr. Blackwell's direction." The tide of the meeting was shifting. I could see it in the board members' expressions, in the way they were reviewing our materials with renewed interest, in the tense whispers between Ethan and Richard. Vanessa leaned forward suddenly. "If I may, Mr. Blackwell. While R&D preservation sounds appealing, the reality is that Rivington's offer is significantly lower than Meridian's. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders to maximize value. Emotional attachments to research projects can't override that duty." Her condescending tone, implying that concern for innovation was merely emotional, visibly irritated several board members. But her intervention gave me the perfect opening for our final move. "Ms. Chen," I said, addressing the former McKinsey consultant directly, "you specialized in long-term value creation during your consulting career. Would you agree that quarterly cost-cutting often comes at the expense of sustainable growth?" Janet's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Research certainly suggests that's the case, particularly in technology sectors." I nodded. "Mr. Wilson," I continued, turning to the venture capitalist, "what multiple do innovative R&D pipelines command in current market conditions compared to established product lines?" Thomas Wilson straightened. "In the security technology sector, a premium of at least 3 to 4x revenue for companies with proven innovation pipelines versus 1 to DX for legacy product portfolios." "Exactly," I said. "Which is why Rivington's seemingly lower offer actually represents higher true value when you consider the long-term impact of maintaining Blackwell's innovation engine. I opened my portfolio and removed the final document we'd prepared, the masterstroke Victoria had conceived just hours earlier. Board members, in recognition of the value we place on Blackwell's innovation culture, Rivington is prepared to add a contingent payment structure to our offer. If the R&D division achieves specific breakthrough milestones over the next 5 years, additional payments will be triggered, potentially exceeding Meridian's current bid by up to 12%. The room erupted in murmurs. Ethan's face darkened as he whispered urgently to Richard. This payment structure, I continued once the noise subsided, aligns Rivington's incentives directly with Blackwell's innovative potential. Rather than cutting research to achieve short-term earnings targets, we benefit financially from preserving and enhancing what makes Blackwell exceptional. Gregory Blackwell's expression remained carefully neutral, but I could see a spark of interest in his eyes. That's a significant modification to your offer, Ms. Montgomery. I assume the details are in these documents? Complete with the specific technical milestones and corresponding payment triggers, I confirmed. Developed in consultation with industry experts to ensure they're both ambitious and achievable. Ethan stood abruptly. Mr. Blackwell, Meridian would like to request time to prepare a response to this new development. Changing terms at the final. Hour is highly unusual. Gregory's smile was thin. So is threatening litigation to influence a board's decision, Mr. Crawford. Yet here we are. He turned to his fellow board members. I suggest we take 30 minutes to review Rivington's modified offer, then reconvene to discuss next steps. As the board members filed out with our materials, Ethan brushed past me, stopping just long enough to whisper, "This isn't over, Maddie. You have no idea what you've started." I met his gaze calmly. Actually, I know exactly what I've started. The question is whether you understand what you finished when you decided I was disposable. His face flushed with anger, but Vanessa pulled him away before he could respond. As they left, I caught her glancing back at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Perhaps the first flicker of understanding that the woman Ethan had discarded might not have been as inconsequential as he'd claimed. Victoria touched my arm lightly. "Well played," she murmured. The contingent payment structure was the perfect counter to their price advantage. "Do you think it will be enough?" I asked quietly. Victoria's smile was cryptic. "I think you just demonstrated exactly why I wanted you on this team. Now we wait." The next hour was the longest of my life. Mason, Victoria, and I retreated to a small conference room Blackwell's assistant had directed us to, while Ethan and the Meridian team occupied a similar space down the hall. We could hear occasional raised voices from their direction. Clearly, they were scrambling to formulate a counteroffer. When we were finally called back to the boardroom, Gregory Blackwell was alone, the other board members conspicuously absent. "Please, sit down," he said, gesturing to the chairs across from him. We complied, the unexpected intimacy of the setting heightening my anxiety. Where was the rest of the board? Where was Ethan? "The board has reached its decision," Gregory said, without preamble. "We've instructed our legal team to proceed with Rivington's offer, contingent payment structure included." Relief and disbelief flooded through me in equal measure. We'd won. Against Meridian's financial advantage and Ethan's personal attacks, we'd actually won. "Meridian's team was informed privately before you arrived," Gregory continued, explaining their absence. "Mr. Crawford expressed significant disappointment with our decision." I could only imagine Ethan's reaction. The merger he'd staked his career on, the promotion to CFO, the plans he'd made with Vanessa, all evaporated because of the ex-wife he'd underestimated. "Mr. Blackwell," Victoria said, her voice professionally modulated despite our victory, "we appreciate the board's confidence in our vision for Blackwell's future. We won't let you regret this decision." Gregory nodded, then surprised us by focusing on me. Ms. Montgomery, may I ask a personal question? Of course, I replied, curious. Was this worth it? Not the acquisition itself, but the personal vindication against your ex-husband? The directness of his question caught me off guard. I considered deflecting, but Gregory's penetrating gaze deserved honesty. When I first joined Rivington, revenge was a significant motivator, I admitted. But somewhere along the way, that changed. This became about proving something to myself, not to Ethan. About reclaiming the professional identity I'd set aside. Gregory smiled slightly. I thought you might say that, which is why I'd like to discuss your role in the integration process. Victoria and I have been talking about establishing a dedicated innovation division within the combined company, preserving Blackwell's research culture while leveraging Rivington's resources. We believe you might be the right person to lead that division. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. Consider it, he said, rising to indicate our meeting was concluding. The details are in the final agreement. We can discuss specifics once the deal closes. As we left the building, the significance of what had just happened began to sink in. Not only had we secured the acquisition, but I'd been offered a leadership position in the combined company, not as someone's wife or assistant, but based on my own demonstrated abilities. In the car back to Rivington's offices, Victoria finally allowed herself a rare smile of genuine satisfaction. Congratulations, Madeline. You didn't just help win an acquisition, you secured your own future in the process. I still can't believe it worked, I admitted. That we actually outmaneuvered Ethan and Meridian. Believe it, Victoria said firmly. And remember this feeling. This is what happens when you refuse to accept the limitations others place on you. As we pulled into Rivington's building, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a message from Vanessa, of all people. He underestimated you completely. I won't make the same mistake. I showed it to Victoria, who laughed. Smart woman. Perhaps she's learning from his mistakes faster than he is. That evening, alone in my apartment with a glass of champagne Victoria had pressed into my hands before I left the office, I finally felt the full weight of everything that had happened since that disastrous anniversary night. The humiliation, the rage, the determination, the growth, all of it had led to this moment of transformation. I hadn't just survived Ethan's betrayal. I had leveraged it into an opportunity that would never have existed otherwise. The woman arranging flowers and dreaming of babies had become a corporate strategist with a leadership position in a major acquisition. My phone rang, pulling me from my reflections. It was Olivia. Maddie, are you okay? I've been worried sick about you. I took a deep breath, suddenly realizing how much I'd isolated myself in my quest for vindication. I'm more than okay, Liv. And I think I'm finally ready for that family dinner. There's a lot I need to tell you about. Does it involve why Ethan called Mom in a rage this afternoon, demanding to know if she'd heard from you? I laughed, genuinely amused by the image. It might. I'll explain everything tomorrow, I promise. After hanging up, I walked to the window of my apartment, gazing out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Ethan was facing the consequences of his actions. Not because I'd sought revenge, but because I'd refused to remain the person he thought I was. The irony wasn't lost on me. By discarding me so callously, he had inadvertently freed me to become exactly the woman I was always meant to be. Confident, ambitious, and far too valuable to be anyone's afterthought. I raised my champagne glass in a silent toast to the future. I was now creating on my own terms.